me introduce our speaker, Lindsey Doolittle, who is an art educator, a children's author, an artist to the Faces After Suicide exhibition, and an award-winning filmmaker. Pretty impressive resume. I am super excited to have her here, and she's here to share her experience as someone who is bereaved by suicide and to help support suicide loss survivors, especially during this time of year. And so after she speaks, she will welcome any and all questions, and she is an open book. So stick around for the questions and the hangout. Lindsey, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. This is wonderful. I think this is a really important topic that deserves a discussion. I'm really glad we're able to do it this evening. So I definitely appreciate you coming on. Do you want to tell us a little bit about why this is an important topic for you?
Okay, so first and foremost, I want to do this because I want better for the next person. And that's always what drives me. And I guess reason why I'm here is on April 22nd of 2015, my late husband, Sergeant Brett Doolittle of the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department, he died by suicide. And we were together for 17 years since I was 15 years old. I met him in high school. He was 18, he was a senior, I was a freshman. It was awesome. We met in art class, and he died 3 days before his 35th birthday. I was 32 when he died. And I learned very quickly that suicide was different from any other death. That night when Brett died, when I came home and I found my late husband, I called his police department for help, and immediately finding out that basically I was on my hands and my knees and I'm screaming for help and no one's helping me. And he had been a cop for 16 years, and these were his colleagues of 16 years. And that night there was only 2 people from the police department that spoke to me. The first one, he pointed at me, he said to sit on my couch and to stay there. And he was pretty angry. It happened outside, but when I was finally able to make it inside, I was trying to find my cats. And then I ended up finding my couch. And I was in shock. I was screaming. And this police officer comes into my living room and he says, "You need to stay on your couch and sit on your couch and stay there." That's not the reaction I thought I was going to get.
Not supportive at
No.
all. I'm so sorry you experienced that.
The second police officer, he told me, even though it didn't happen inside our home, that he needed to have a consent to search form signed by me, so they could search my home. And I really wish I had not signed that form. I wanted anything to bring my husband back. So at that moment I was like, sure, as long as, you can bring him back to me, I'm thinking law and order in my head, like anything I could do to help. So I signed that form, and what they ended up doing was going through my home, and they collected as much of evidence, I guess, to blame our marriage for his death. And they wrote that in the police report. They blamed our marriage in the police report, and they blamed it in the autopsy report too. And I didn't think I could hurt any more than I already did, but I found that you can hurt so much more. It can pile up quickly, and it's become so overwhelming. I know I laugh. It's like what I do instead of cry, to help kind of manage these different feelings that kind of come back in, especially when I talk about it.
Is completely understandable. My goodness, I'm speechless to hear that additional burden was placed on you after such a horrible experience. I am just devastated that happens. How awful.
I mean, they wrote in the autopsy that it was a suicide, but in the initial findings in the autopsy, they wrote how my husband was having marital problems prior to his suicide. And I think of it like, if somebody dies of a heart attack, they're not going to write in the autopsy that they ate like shit for 15 years, right? They're not going to write that. So why would they write this? You know, these people he knew and worked with, you know, from day to day for many years. Why would they write that in there? And I thought, I just thought that they were going to be there for me. I thought my family in blue was going to be there for me, and they were not. It became also the liaisons for the police department. They said how that there was going to be detectives coming over to interview me to rule out that it wasn't a homicide. But I thought, like, when you are ruling out suspects in a homicide, you would talk to more than one person. They only talked to me. Thankfully, my late husband left very methodically evidence that was not going to pin it on me. And unfortunately, not a lot of suicide loss survivors have that luxury. I mean, like, he left receipts of the tools that he used, and he was on video camera that day. And I really appreciate at least that he did that.
He obviously knew, you know, how the investigation would take place.
And he knew for quite a long time. I mean, like, and actually a year prior to his death, he told me not to let any cops inside our house whatsoever without a warrant. And again, like, I at the time was like, should I be worried? Like, I'm laughing. I'm like, what's going on? He said it again, very like, you know, do not let anyone in our home, any cops inside our home without a warrant. And I really wish I would have listened to him. And from there, the funeral in itself was terrible. But then, like, I didn't know how bad, like, some things could get. Like, people, not all of the police department, but a noticeable amount skipped over me and glared at me in line at his casket. And that was pretty terrible. It was completely divided down the middle, where, like, it was me, my family, and then the very, very back, there was some of his friends from high school, and there were some people from my job. And then on the other side of the funeral, it was the sea of blue and his family. Like, they all stayed away. The first person that even talked to me at the funeral well, I talked to them. It was always me approaching them. I asked him if he knew my late husband, and he said, yeah, he had known him for 16 years and had no idea he was even married. And he said, we all have marital problems. And he walked away from me. And I was like, I wanted to crawl into a ball. But that's the difference between like why is suicide different? It's not only you have all of these questions, you're confused, the amount of guilt, loneliness, the rejection feeling, but like people who are mourning of like someone who's died of a physical illness or on the line of duty or an accident, like those mourners, they receive sympathy and compassion. Whereas the lost survivor of suicide, many of us are blamed, we're judged, we're shunned. And it's a pretty terrible feeling. I immediately blamed myself when I found my late husband. And I had yelled at him that morning. There had been some really, the last few years of his life were really terrible. I'm not here to make my husband out to be a monster. I'm not here to put him on a pedestal. I am just here to share what I know. I'll never know everything, but I feel that in the 17 years that Brett and I were together, I now understand that he was dying a lot longer than I knew him. And if the secrets you find out, some of us find out some really, some secrets.
Be so invasive too, like you make a really good point that people don't start digging that way when someone dies of some other kind of reason, like a heart attack or something like that. People don't usually feel compelled to then investigate every deep dark secret of their life. That must have been so incredibly invasive and isolating for you too.
Yes, I played my detective role when others weren't. I decided I'm going to play detective because I immediately blamed myself. And he had attempted 4 months prior to his death. I had accidentally found out he was going to have an affair with someone at his job. And things had been pretty bad prior to that. His drinking had increased. He was very irritable. There were some nights it was absolutely scary to where I didn't ask anybody for help. I didn't know what to say. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was pretty scared, and it was just growing more frequent and more intense, and out of control. The night that I found out this information, he attempted in front of me, and that was terrible. And I was able to stop him. And then I had been asking, let's go to counseling for a while. And by that time, when I found out that information, if he was going to be with somebody else, I said we were going to have to go to marriage counseling. We went to marriage counseling, but he was like a brick wall and didn't want to share a whole lot. And he had pretty much shut down. And I was so scared to even tell the counselor even about his attempt. I didn't even mention it. I talked about other things. She asked him if he was suicidal, and he lied and he said no. And I kept his lie for him too. I remember sobbing when she asked that question. She must have had maybe an inkling. I don't know. I don't blame her at all. I told his best friend about his attempt, And I told him I needed to leave my house, but could you please go and check in on him? I don't blame his friend, and I shouldn't say but, I don't blame his friend. And he went over there and he checked on him. And my late husband lied to him and said that I made everything up. He didn't attempt on his life. But I didn't find this out until after he had died. And he was just doing what best friends do. They believe, and he was believing his best friend. So I don't blame him for anything.
He didn't want to think that that was true
No.
any more than anybody else's best friend.
No. I mean, and no one even knew my late husband drank except for me and his best friend. So everybody else was like in disbelief to hear that he even drank.
So it really was surprising then for a lot of people that he was struggling. He was able to keep that very concealed, it sounds like.
He was like, I feel like Robin Williams. He is always joking around with people. He did a lot of ornery, inappropriate things, what I've heard now at work. He was like that in high school. And but yeah, he was like a Robin Williams, making everybody else laugh. But when he would come home, it was his time to take off that mask. And so found out a lot of secrets after he died. I found out some things before he died. And then you wonder who you were even married to. It's like you lost your husband, then you lost this person, then you lost this person you thought you knew. And it was like grief upon grief upon grief. Yeah.
So that does sound like really one of the ways, like you were kind of asking earlier, how can I describe how suicide is different from, other kinds of grief or other kinds of passing of a loved one. It sounds like this was so layered with additional traumas for you that I hadn't even thought about some of this previously, the way that it sounds like you were shouldering so much of the burden before it happened. And then also it was such a shock to other people afterwards that they were maybe piling additional blame and burdens onto you after the fact as well. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yeah, people would ask me, what happened? Did you do it? Was it you? I was like, what the hell? Like, why would people even ask that question? But they'll come out and they'll ask some pretty brazen questions.
What do they think you're gonna say?
It was me. Yes, thank you. I mean, and like I said, I blamed myself. One of the things I had wanted our bank account information. He had control of our bank accounts, and I wanted to know the username and password ever since I had found out about the other person. And for 4 months, he wasn't giving it to me. And that final night, I had said, if you don't give it to me by tomorrow, you will have no home here. Like I felt backed into a corner. I didn't know what to do. I thought he was hiding something terrible. The next morning, I again yelled at him before I went to work. The first time I never said I love you to him. I stomped off, came home, found him. He also had taken off his wedding ring and he had put it on top of my wedding ring that was on the fire mantle that I had there for 4 months. And so immediately I blamed myself. I yelled at him. He died because I yelled at him. Or I wish I'd never found out about the other person. If I hadn't only found out about that person, he would be still alive. If this or that, or woulda, coulda, shoulda, that woulda, coulda, shoulda game. But you never win on that woulda, coulda, shoulda game, I found. But it was after the investigation, after the funeral, for weeks, I hadn't gone to the bank. And my dad was like, we have to go. We have to find how much money you have, where your bills go. I had completely shut down. And so we got a print off, and I was so scared to look at it. I thought, oh God, there's not going to be anything in there. But there was. He was hiding something, and he had taken out a huge loan, and he paid off all our debt before he died. So he planned this all out very methodically. And in the state of Kansas, whoever signs for the loan doesn't have to pay back a penny. So he knew what he was doing. So he took care of the finances. He tried to take care of me, I believe, the best that he could. He wrote a suicide letter that he felt like he wrote that he felt like a piece of shit, and he didn't know how to help the situation. He blamed his job for his suicide, but that's not even in the police report, you know.
How convenient.
Yeah. They reference the letter. They say there is a suicide letter, but they didn't write in there how he directly blamed his job for his problems. Now, I don't blame his job. It's funny. It's like the police department, they blame our marriage for his death. My late husband blamed his job, and I blame no one. I have always said that I feel like his life exceeded his coping skills. That's what I feel.
This is obviously such a complex issue. You mentioned, how long this had been going on for him and the amount of planning that went into it. Obviously, this isn't a case of someone having a really bad day, or, if only this person hadn't said X or Y or Z to me. Clearly, this was something that was, very, very deeply entrenched and ongoing for some time. I wanted to ask you, though, if you had any thoughts on that. You did mention that, he blamed his job. This is an issue that comes up a lot with first responders and veterans and things like that. Do you want to comment at all on that? Do you see a connection there, or any kind of advice or tips for people that might be in that situation?
Here's my thoughts. People always say it's a stressful job. Well, in that case, they all should be dead. Like, it is a stressful job. I feel, though, that job kept him alive. This job, I found out after he died. His family told me how he had been molested by a secret stepdad. I didn't even know about the stepdad. He kept it a secret. They all kept it a secret. I don't blame his mom. She didn't want that for him. She did not believe him when he was little. They tried to put him in therapy. He refused. They put him in Boy Scouts instead. There's a significance to Boy Scouts I'll come back to. But this secret stepdad, my late husband went to his teachers when he was in school and told them, and that's when law enforcement got involved. And it happened in Kansas City, Kansas, where my late husband worked as a police officer. This stepdad's sister, who was on the police department, she came to the rescue of her brother and said my brother would never have done something like that. So I feel there's a reason why Brett was on that police department, wanting to help others. I think that it helped him. That's just what I feel in my heart. I will never know for sure. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about other people. I'm sure people, it exceeds their coping skills, what they see, what they experience. The stigma trying to get help, it's seen as a weakness, that you're selfish. If you're a police officer who's supposed to be really strong and if you go for help, they're going to take away your gun. And my late husband didn't want his gun taken away. When we went to counseling, he said he didn't want to be labeled as depressed and he didn't want his gun taken away, though his gun should have been taken away.
Right. Yeah, that's a really sticky issue too, with this whole, kind of warrior culture that we have in, police and military circles, where you're in some ways not allowed to show any weakness. But if you're not allowed to show any weakness, how can you be a human person and get help when you need it, which we obviously, all do at some time or another in our lives. That's so unfortunate that he didn't feel like he could access help, even if it had been available to him.
No. And also my husband was a closeted atheist. He didn't want people knowing. He did not want the Boy Scouts of America to find out. He was a district commissioner for the Boy Scouts and he would lose his position. It was just like he mentioned it one time. And when he mentioned it, I was like, oh, I'm an atheist too. Like we never talked about it. And I still didn't say anything because of how closeted he was. I thought, oh, I better stay quiet too. So we never talked about it. We just both stayed quiet. And it wasn't until after his death that I found that it was so important for me that I needed to be out. Because there was a chaplain that came to our house the night that Brett died. He came from the police department, like on behalf of the police department, and told me how God loved my husband and he was going to take care of him. And he went on and on and on. I mean, I'm screaming on my couch and he just kept going. And I'm thinking, shut up. You are adding so much unnecessary. Like, I just wanted him to shut up. And then they took me to the hospital and there they pumped me up full of sedatives, and they couldn't take me to the mental health ward since I was on sedatives. But guess who came into my room to comfort me? Another chaplain. And I didn't ask for him to be there. And he came in telling me how Jesus Christ loved me, that he loved my husband. And I remember being in and out of sedation, but I did say my husband was an atheist. And then I closed my eyes, opened them, and he was gone. I was like, oh, is that all it took,
Goodness. I mean, the hubris of just assuming that would be a welcome conversation for people to have without even asking ahead of time is kind of shocking. Although I can't say I'm surprised, but disappointed that people are allowed to add to the trauma of survivors of this kind of incident by simply just thinking it's okay for them to come bother you in the hospital. That's very upsetting.
And then even for the funeral, I was so confused. I wanted him cremated. His wishes were to be burned and dumped in the trash. That's what he wanted. But instead, I asked for him to be cremated, but at the funeral, he was in a coffin. I was like, what's going on here? And then they told me from the police department, the liaison said, that there was going to be so many police officers. We're going to have it in a really big place. And this is the only place we can think of. And it's a church. This is where my mother was buried. This lady was telling me. And I was like, okay, because I did not want it in a church, but I didn't know how to speak up and say, I'm an atheist. And he was an atheist. And so he was in a casket. He got cremated later. I wanted it shut. I knew that he wouldn't want people to look at him. But I was so mad at that church because he loved Beatles, and he loved that song Across the Universe, and they would not, it was moments before the service, and they said, we cannot play this song. I was like, what? Why
Wow.
not? What's wrong with this song? They said they could not play that song, that it would go against their church. And I was like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you weren't even allowed to grieve in a way that was in any way comforting to you.
I felt terrible. I felt like I did him a disservice. And the chaplain spoke at his funeral. I was like, oh, this is terrible. But yeah, I see the importance of speaking up, because I do not want to have a church service for my funeral. Like, I want to make sure like that doesn't happen for myself, like what I feel for myself. And also it's not just like after I die, but like how I want to live my life. Like, I feel that secrets ate my husband up.
Mm.
I don't want that same thing. Like, I'm hiding and being secretive. And it wasn't too long after his death, maybe a couple years, I found a community, Oasis, here in Kansas City, a community without religion. And it was also the first atheist speaker I saw was Dr. Darrel Ray.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
I could not believe what he was saying up there on stage about the Pledge of Allegiance, because it was everything I had been feeling inside, but here somebody was actually saying it. And yes, it was amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad you found that. I was going to ask, where did you turn to for support, given that all of the places that you thought, might support you, his coworkers, your blue family, as you said, we're not there for you, friends and family. It sounds like we're not supportive. What was Oasis the place that you went? Were there other places that you were able to find support that was helpful?
Oh, yes. My support group, SAS, Suicide Awareness Survivor Support, had an in-person support group. This is prior to the pandemic. And I went there every second and fourth Tuesday. It was the best gift I gave myself. They there taught me that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't to blame. They educated me on the stigmas of suicide. Everybody in there had a different kind of loss. There was people, and there was best friends, children, parents, partners. I mean, it was hearing their experiences. Like, everybody's story is unique, but there's all these common threads. And it became my suicide loss family. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. I'm so glad you were able to find that support. And kind of similar question, but did you learn any like coping strategies or skills for managing grief as well? Is it a different kind of grief when it's suicide, or are there some common kind of themes that people could learn that would help?
Well, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress not too long after his death. It was several months later, and severe grief spurts.
Mm.
Um, and I found that other people in there had as well been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, even if they didn't find them. And some people witnessed it, it was right in front of them, and in front of their kids even, it's like, so these unwanted, intrusive images every day, all day, nonstop, can't get away from them. People asking you, how are you? And you're like, don't even know how to answer that. And because all you can see in their face is what you saw when came upon this. And Yeah. People telling me that getting a professional, like your own therapist, um, that was very helpful, getting pointed in that direction. Um, um, I guess the strategies in there, it wasn't really like strategies. It was mainly like, how did you do this? Like where I was coming in to the support group crying and sobbing and thinking, this is my life. I am going to be in agony and despair for the rest of my life. But I see people in there that are laughing and smiling. And I'm like, how are they doing that? Because they had been so far away from the death. It's like, how are they doing that? And learning from everybody's different experiences. One of the biggest things was, because I thought, I'm going to lick this thing. I'm coming in. I'm going to not remember his name. I'm going to forget about him, and I'm going to lick this thing. And I found that is not what happens. And they said, you don't get over it, you get through it. That was helpful. What else was helpful was hearing like holiday tips to get through the holidays, or like his birthday, special occasions. Like right now, like with the holidays upon us, I'm 7 years out. It's difficult. And it's not where I was, though. I can see that I've made progress, but it's still difficult. And something I had to learn was put boundaries for myself, because your loved ones who care about you, all they want is you to be happy. They all want the same like traditions, but you might not want that same tradition. You might want to change it up. Whatever's right for you is going to be the right thing, but you might not want to follow that same tradition, or you want to start a new tradition, or maybe you find comfort in giving to others, volunteering, but putting like boundaries on yourself. Or if you do go, which I did do a lot of, was I wanted to please my family. I felt terrible what had happened, and I just didn't want anything else to be hurting. So I wanted to please them, and it wasn't really what I wanted. And but having a plan, like an escape plan, like seeing everybody happy with, my sisters have children and family and their spouses, and my parents, and everybody's so happy. And I'm like, this dread. And there, at first I didn't have an escape plan. Now I have escape plans, where I can go to and just break down if I need to. Having that plan, how to respond to people when they're like, are you having a happy holiday? I'm like, oh, no, not really. Sometimes I'm like, get ready. I'm about to give you the truth. Like,
yeah, it's a presumptuous question to ask.
Yes.
If you're not ready for a real answer, maybe don't say that.
Sometimes I might lie a little and say, oh, I'm doing okay. If I just don't even want to go there. But if sometimes I want to go there, I'll go there. Yeah.
Sounds like this was really a process too for you to you were forced to learn a lot of new ways to advocate for yourself too. Was that part of the growth that happened for you?
Definitely. The police department, what they did was they added to my grief. There was so much silence after Brett died. And I'm an elementary art teacher, and even my school was silent. Like, we as teachers come together when there is a death of a staff member or student. Like, we're fundraising, we're wearing t-shirts, there's gonna be casseroles. There was nothing. It was like silent. People came to the funeral. I appreciate that. but nobody wanted to talk about it. And I wanted to talk about it. And my students wanted to know what happened to Officer Doolittle. He used to come eat lunch with me. And so here's my littles asking me what happened to him. And I didn't want to lie. And I went to my principal, my former principal, and I asked them, could I at least tell them that he was sick? And they said, I wouldn't even go that far. And it made me so mad. It made me feel further ostracized and isolated. And my rage, I was so angry. I was angry at the silence that was happening. I was angry at the blame. And I was so upset that, that Brett was gone and all these secrets I found out, it just kept piling up to the point where my life has exceeded my coping skills. And I attempted on my life. And it was a year and a half after Brett had died. And I was on vacation and with my friends, and I had attempted, and it thankfully didn't happen. I remember getting dressed, cleaned up, went out to lunch, went dancing, didn't tell anyone. It was when I got home that I realized I really had to get some professional help, and I did, and I still have that professional help. It helped me be more honest, and I also was honest with my parents, which I was so scared. I was more scared of telling them the truth than I was with my own therapist. But they survived, right? They survived, they care. I thought, oh goodness, my therapist is going to put me in a facility. Like I had every stigma in my head, like straight jacket, like I'm going to be in this place. I don't know how long. But my therapist, she told me, if we put everybody in facilities involuntarily for having these thoughts, we would have like no room. There would be so many people. And she's like, I'm not going to do that. And so I was like, oh my goodness, like all these worries I had in my head. Yeah, I'm glad that I spoke up.
Oh, and that is so powerful too, to hear you describe how all of those factors came together to, lead to the situation where you found yourself in those circumstances. Thank you, by the way, for sharing that. I know that's a really personal detail to share with us. I really appreciate you being so vulnerable about this. I strongly suspect that there are other people that will hear that story and be able to really identify and appreciate your voicing how bad it was. Would you be able to describe, do you think, any things that would have helped that you wish had happened after this incident? What was the support that you wish you had received that other people can provide in future?
Great question. I wish people would have just treated it like any other death. Somebody like check-ins. I wish somebody from the department would have checked in. One of his colleagues would have come over and said that they didn't blame me. I wish they would have come over and said that. I wish it wasn't me reaching out, because 2 cops did come eventually. And one of them told me how the police department was blaming me. And then the second one, it took him 2 years before he would come over. And then it was 2 years too late. Like I was so mad. And it was always me reaching out. And it shouldn't have been that way. Like if you cared about Brett, like you should have reached out. Like people, it's when somebody dies in the line of duty, there's 24/7 round the clock care. I mean, like casseroles galore. Make sure you bring a casserole. Okay. Like, I guess it's really up to that person what they're wanting, but that's what I wish I would have had. I wish somebody would have come over and asked me, what do you want, Lindsey? What is it that you need? I might not have been able to answer that question, but just seeing that they cared enough to even ask, that would have been so, like, a game changer right there. Even if you don't know what to say, that's what I would say. I would say, I don't know what to say, but I care about you and I'm here. That's what you need to do. Like,
Yeah. That's so interesting that you say that. I've recently had a couple of friends that dealt with a different kind of health situation, and that was one of the big complaints, that they mentioned is, we're awkward. People are awkward, and sometimes we don't know what to say, and we say the absolute worst thing possible. But, showing up and caring, it sounds like, really goes a long way, even if people aren't exactly sure how to deal with it. Would you say just showing up would have been better than nothing?
yeah, I've had a lot of people say, I just didn't know what to say.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's what you say, you know?
Yeah. Just say that. Words.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really powerful. I think that's really good advice to give people, because you're right. There were probably people that wanted to help and they didn't know what to do, and they talked themselves out of it, rather than you know putting their own discomfort aside and trying to help someone who's clearly suffering.
Yeah.
Like, wow, I'm sorry that people did not do that for you.
Well, I have family and my close friends, and I know it was hard for them too. Everybody grieves in different ways, I have found.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, just the people that I thought were going to be there for me, some of them were not. And then you had some really special people that you never expected, that they come and they're there for you. Like you guys, like what you're doing right now. This is amazing that you're even, you're having this discussion. You want to have this discussion on RfR. And I so appreciate that.
Well, and I am so glad that you were willing to come on and talk about this too, because like you said, especially this time of year, it can be really difficult. I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation when we did. And yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier about, you ran into Dr. Ray giving a talk when you were looking for support. Is that how you ended up getting more involved in RfR?
Yes. Okay, if I can tell a funny story. um, I was seeing somebody who was religious. Like I started seeing somebody not too long after my husband's death, and I didn't mind that he was religious. I told him I wasn't, and um, yeah, when I started going to Oasis, that person said I could not go to Oasis. They said it was evil. Those people were evil. Um, he didn't know how to tell his family, his children. It was embarrassing. Um, that
Wow.
everybody in
For,
Oasis was going to go to hell.
wow.
Uh,
For,
I
for
was.
people that aren't familiar, what is Oasis?
It's a community without religion, and they meet every Sunday, and they have guest speakers come. I saw Mandisa there. I've seen Seth Andrews
Mhm.
and Dr. Darrel Ray. I've seen so many. It's like sometimes it's like on electric cars. It's kind of just a little bit of everything. There's some musical guests, and so that person said goodbye to, but like that person didn't want to quit, like kept reaching out. even came when Dr. Darrel Ray spoke again, but they did not like Dr. Darrel Ray, which made me even like Dr. Darrel Ray even more. And yeah, so yes, they were a community that I was so glad that I got to meet, and I still go from time to time to Oasis. I needed them also because I sit on the board for my support group, and they asked me to be on the board. They said they wanted fresh new ideas. And we do support groups, but we also have an annual walk. There's other things that we do for loss survivors in our community. And one of my suggestions was, instead of at the walk, we have this giant prayer. Okay. So I had mentioned, instead of doing a prayer, how about having a moment of silence? Because not everybody is religious. Like, I was not out at this time. And I could feel my heart racing, but I was like, this is not about me. This is loss survivors. And one thing they taught me in the support group is suicide does not discriminate. It doesn't discriminate against race, gender, age, career choices, how much you love that person. It does not discriminate. And here I felt we were marginalizing people at the walks, having this giant prayer. And it was really hard for me to say it because we have a chaplain who he's on our board, and it was very hard for me to speak up. And I love all these people. Like I said, they're my suicide loss family. And so I mentioned instead to have a moment of silence, and you would have thought I asked them to cut off their arm.
Wow.
It did not go very well.
And this was after you were sitting on the board of the organization?
Oh, I'm still on that board.
I love that. Good for you. Clearly, you did not let their reaction stop you.
It did not go good. There are going to be some changes. We have a new president, and that president feels the way I do. And this is about loss survivors, and not every loss survivor is Christian. So, yes, I'm excited to see where this is going to go, but this has been years. This was before the pandemic that I brought this up. Things have been very odd and weird, but I have not left, and I still believe in support groups. I don't know if this is like a good time. Can I tell this announcement?
Yes, go
Because
ahead.
RfR, so you guys have started a suicide loss survivor channel, but you also are having a virtual support group. And I'm going to be facilitating that along with Dave Bowles. I believe he's on here. So, hey, Dave. And he said I could say his name. So I have to go through the RfR training. I've had my training through the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention for facilitator training, but need the RfR side. So that's going to take a little bit. But once that's done, yes, we will have the virtual suicide loss support group.
I am so excited about that. And as soon as you have the details about that and you're ready to launch it, by all means, let us know, and we will be promoting it on here aggressively.
Yes.
So I cannot wait. And I just am so impressed. I know I've said this a couple of times, but I am just floored that you were able to come out of this experience, and now you're in a position to where you're advocating for other people who, are in a similar situation to you, and being able to offer all of this support and have these conversations and run the support groups and fight the battles that it sounds like, you would have liked people to have been there to do for you. And you've kind of become your own hero, I guess, in that way. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, this is incredible. I'm just really, really impressed. again. And I imagine that this is one of those things that, we have interesting talks every week and good advice, but I mean, you are really doing the work here, that so desperately, obviously needed to be done. So thank you for providing that for people.
I just feel like it is I don't know about me being a hero, but I will tell you, I feel like it is just, I put my fears, even though I am so scared of controversy, it plagues my mind. I get so worried. But I put that to the side and I think about what is helpful, what is going to be helpful, what is going to be helpful for my future students. Like, what's helpful to the students I have right now? What is going to be helpful for my nieces and nephews? That's what like keeps me like thinking and going with this.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. I love that. And while we're on the topic, do you want to mention any other helpful resources or things that you would like people to check out or that might be helpful?
I okay, so I have it. I think I sent you one of the links for the suicide loss survivor pamphlet. I think it's SOS pamphlet. That little book was the best little book. I kept it by my bedside for like 2 years after Brett died. So helpful. And there's nothing religious inside of it. So it was all very secular, and I really appreciated that. That was helpful. The American Foundation of Suicide Prevention website, I like it because if you're like, I don't know what to do, like my friend, I'm worried for my friend. I think they're going to hurt themselves. There's a button on there you can click and it'll tell you exactly what to do. Or, my friend just lost somebody to suicide. Click. Now I know exactly what I can do. So it has like great little resources on there.
Oh, that is wonderful. That sounds like something that is desperately needed, that people don't know what to do. Here's some ideas.
The Trevor Project for LGBTQIA+, for their helpline, that's on there. Yeah, I listed that resource. Yeah.
And I'm putting all these in the chat, and we'll have them in the show notes as well for people to check out. Thank you for providing these.
The one other one was NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I love them because they have 2 different support groups, and this is nationwide. You can find a chapter anywhere you live in the US. Hopefully it'll expand. I know there's people in different countries on RfR. NAMI though has right now where if you love someone who's struggling with a brain illness, there's a support group for you. Also, if you are living with a brain illness, there is a support group for you. So, and it's free and it's virtual. There's some in-person meetings, but there's virtual meetings too. And I know that the people that run those virtual meetings, if you are from out of the country and you sign on, they'll welcome you.
Excellent. That is really useful information. Thank you for sharing all of that. Also, I know we've had one other, I think, RfRx meeting to do with suicide, and we've got some resources on our page as well. I'm going to drop the link to the resources link that might have some pertinent information from RfR too. So let me just put that in there. But those are excellent recommendations. Thank you so much. And you also have some links to promote, yes?
Oh, yeah. Whoop, totally forgot. So I have 2 movies I made.
For detail.
I wrote and published a children's book here. Okay, so yeah, I think the response with my school made me angry. And I wrote this children's book on how to explain suicide loss to children. There's no books out there for kids. And so the way I wrote it is the way, like I explain it in my classroom when we're teaching about Vincent van Gogh, it's like us as art teachers, we're telling them, oh, here's this beautiful painting of Starry Night, but we're not telling them where he was when he painted it. Or we show the kids, here's this self-portrait of Van Gogh after he cut off his ear, but we're not telling them even remotely why he's cut off his ear. And so it's like everything that we don't explain to kids, that is in a gentle way, like how to say it in a gentle way without sweeping it under the rug. And that's that I felt that the police department swept it under the rug. And my website's called Above the Rug because I feel that I'm above the rug on this. I put it out there. If it helps somebody, I don't want it to be swept under the rug anymore. So abovetherug.com is my website, and on there, I have my movies on there, but I have 2 short films. One is an animation of the book, and all of the animation is done by the loss survivors in my support group. They drew the different illustrations, and I just had those animated for a short film. And then one is for the love of my documentary. It's the love that I have for my support group. And I made a short documentary. I released them last year. And between both of them, they've won 15 Best Award winners in 50 different countries they've played in in over 20 different countries at 50 different film festivals. And I just made them because I was angry and I thought they were a resource. I didn't think of them as films. It was my mom's friend who encouraged me to put them in there. But RfR, they're on your suicide loss channel. So you don't even have to go to my website. You can just go on to RfR suicide loss channel and you can watch them. Thank you guys so much for wanting to even put them on there. I mean, they've now run their course at the film festivals. A lot of people have asked me, what are you going to do with them? I'm like, I don't know. That's a great question. And I love that you guys wanted to put them on there. If they can help someone, I don't get money for them. Like, this is not a money thing. It's just, if you guys need them, great. So it's on there for you guys.
This is an incredible resource. I am so excited that you contributed that. This is like a perfect example of, every week when we're talking about, hey, try volunteering for RfR and, healing can come from helping other people. Like, this is a perfect example of how you have done that and making that was great grammar. I can word. Start that sentence again. A perfect example of how you have taken this opportunity to find a way to heal by helping so many other people with something that's so difficult, and there was clearly a desperate need for these resources. I am just, again, I'm so impressed that you've been able to do this. And if I don't even know how many people this has tremendously helped, but I guarantee that it has. And that is wonderful. I'm so happy that you shared that with us. So yes, everybody check those out. We got the links in the chat, and you can find them and feel free to use them and benefit as you will. All right, Lindsey, this has been incredible. I cannot thank you enough for coming and opening up to us about this and sharing your incredibly powerful story. Before we go to Q&A, is there anything else that you want to tell us about or you want people to know?
Okay, can I say 2 things?
Yes.
I have found that if you want to, actually 3 things. Joan Rivers' husband, her late husband, Edgar, he died by suicide. And she said in her book, Bouncing Back, that don't give 2 shits what other people think. And you go out and you have to make yourself happy. And I felt horrible trying to make myself happy after Brett died. I thought, I have to show people how much I love him. My pain equals my love. And that is so not the truth right there. And I love that quote of hers. So yeah, don't give two shits what other people think. That's hard, but I tried doing my very best. The other one is I found that you don't have to have a lot of money to make a film, but you do have to have a lot of guts to share your heart. So if you got something that you have to say it. Um, the other thing I would like to say is, like, I know I've mentioned Dr. Darrel Ray so many times and how much I appreciate him, his work. I also want to just say how there's like two really strong atheist women that have stood out in this whole like journey that I have. And I'm going to mention her alias name if anybody wants to find her on Facebook, but Janie Miller is amazing. She's a great friend. She inspires me with things that she does in the community. That's going to make me cry. And then Miss Melissa Latham, she is as well, strong atheist, like outspoken. I've learned so much. Like, they've taken me under their wing, and I really appreciate that. Like, they're so patient and so kind and caring. And yeah, I just want to say that.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm pretty sure there are going to be some people that are mentioning your name as well, along with those others. You have done so much to help. Thank you for all of your work on that and for sharing with us this evening. And on that note, let's go to Q&A if you're ready for that. We have a few questions that we'll go into, and feel free if people have more questions, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We'll get through as many of them as we can, and if we don't get to all of them, we'll go to the Hangout as well, where we can discuss a little bit more. But let's see, someone was asking in the chat earlier, and there was a little bit of discussion. We talked about this a little bit, but if you have any further thoughts, by all means, let us know. They were asking about this kind of denial and avoidance mentality, wondering if this is something that also happens in the military regarding suicide, and if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because in my support group, I've met many spouses of soldiers who've died by suicide. And it is just not me who's blamed. I mean, there is a whole culture out there, and it's not just military or police, it is across the board. And I think what happens is it's so much easier. I'm going to steal the words from Sue Claybold. Sue Claybold is the mother of Dylan Claybold, one of the Columbine shooters. She is an amazing woman, by the way. Got to meet her. She does so much for the community, even though people blame her so bad to this day. But she says how people point a finger. It's easier to blame a catalyst than to really look inside that person's life or to know what's even happened. It's like easier, it's safer for them to say, that can't ever happen to me. That happen, that can happen in that family, but it would never happen to me. So this, yes, denial, catalysts. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, and kind of a similar question then too. Some people are wondering, what can we do to deal with this stigma that seems to persist around suicide, as opposed to other kinds of loss?
I think the more we can share our experiences, like listening to the stories from others, I think also supporting loss survivors. It shouldn't matter how someone died. Being there and supporting one another, because people just kind of shy and disappear and they don't stay around. They just don't know what to say, or they blame you. And so to not blame, and I think that could be really hard for some, because I was really dead set on blaming myself. So I don't blame myself anymore. But listening to those shared experiences, those lived experiences, kind of, I hate to say it, like normalizes it, but like to get it into our vocabulary, even like instead of this dirty word, suicide, and hush hush it and sweep it under the rug, but to talk about it more.
It's not going to go away if we ignore it. I love that also about that your website is above the rug. I love that way of talking about it, is stop sweeping this under the rug. Let's get it out there and deal with it. I think that is fabulous. So thank you for that. Okay, couple of questions were a little bit similar. Some people were wondering, so what, and this may have to do with some of the resources that you already shared, so if we're repeating, sorry. Some people were wondering, what if you do have a loved one who's showing concerning signs of depression, or indicators like that? What can people do? Obviously, it's not, you talked about, people want to blame themselves, and that's not the correct thing, but are there things people can try to do in these circumstances to help?
If somebody is having suicidal ideation,
Yeah, somebody that they know or care about, that they're concerned, maybe having suicidal ideation.
I'm not a professional. I will say I've had that question asked a lot of me. And what I say is, if you feel safe, can you get them like to their therapist? Can you sit with them until there is professional help for them? Can you drive them to a hospital or a facility, letting them know that you care about them? I know my older sister, after Brett died, I hadn't bathed in days, and when the funeral happened, I wanted to shave my legs, and she wouldn't let me out of her sight, not with that razor. She wanted to make sure she sat by that bathroom door, and I'm glad that she did. If you don't feel safe, you know, um, you know, I would not stay around. Um, I have a friend who got shot by her boyfriend, and then he died by suicide. So if you don't feel safe, then I say take care of yourself, and you can find help for them, but not around them. And I know there's the 988 number that's out. That one's hard for me because I'm still like thinking about things, taking a step back before I jump on the bandwagon here, because so many, like a lot of people who call, if they don't have a means of a community or family or professional help, you might be involuntarily then somebody will be dispatched to get you help because they believe that, getting help rather than harm, in that moment. But also people who are involuntarily placed in facilities, there is a higher chance of them dying by suicide once they leave versus somebody who is voluntarily gone into a facility. Or also it is very expensive. So then you're left with this financial burden that could have been also maybe something that was plaguing you. Also, I don't know how trauma informed they are with 988. I know the creator of the 988, John Draper, I mean, he's doing a wonderful thing to help people for that hotline. I think this is maybe it's in the right direction. I don't know if it's there yet, so I would check that out yourself to see what you think about that. Sorry if that was too long.
No, not at all. That's great. That's what the questions are for, to get your thoughts on it. I appreciate that information. I know that we've gone over a lot, and I'll put the links that you mentioned as well one more time in the chat too. Um, if we have time for one more question, and this may be far too long to answer succinctly, but we'll see. Someone is wondering if you want to talk at all about how you became an atheist, or maybe you always were.
I've always been an atheist. Yeah, always have been. And I would drop things here and there around my family. But it wasn't, I came out to my support group first. And then when, by the way, I just want to make sure everybody knows I still love them. I love them. I love my support group. I mean, everybody on the board, I love them. And that's why I'm also still there. So I will say another funny story. When I came out very publicly, it was by accident. I was on an author's panel for my children's book, and it was at a church. It was with the Grief Support Network in Kansas City. And I was invited to come out with 3 other authors and talk about our books. They were all on grief. Each one was different types of grief. And the first person who spoke, we had like 10 minutes to speak about our books in front of this giant audience of clinicians, therapists, psychiatrists. I mean, this whole audience. Okay. And then the first person was speaking about how their book was on, I think, losing a parent. And they said, this book is for anyone who's lost a parent. And I believe in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. And this is a faith-based book. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, they just said that. Okay, are we supposed to say that? And then the second person they said how they lost a child in childbirth and that they believed in Jesus Christ, their Lord and Savior. This was a faith-based book. And I was like, oh my goodness. My heart was like thumping. I was like, oh my gosh, are we supposed to say what we are? And then the third person, they as well. I don't remember their grief book, but it was, again, I believe in Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. I'm in the Midwest. Okay. That's all I can say. And then I get up and I say what my book is about. And then right before I ended, I said, oh, and I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God, but I wrote my book for anyone to pick up because suicide doesn't discriminate. So I want to make sure that anyone who picked up this book, it would be for them. And then I remember wanting to throw up, but I had so many people lined up wanting to talk to me, and they were doing the same thing. They would say, oh, thank you so much. I'm an atheist too. I only had a couple of people that were like, I'm going to pray for you.
Well, okay, you can
okay.
one of the other books.
But so many were like, I'm an atheist.
I love that. And, because you were brave enough to say that out loud, like you made that product available for all those people that did not want a book about grief and Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Yep. That was how I came out.
I love that. You did it big.
Yeah.
That is outstanding. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that story and for writing that book and one-upping everybody at the conference.
Thanks.
My book is for everybody.
I know. I was like, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Word vomit. My sister even said, after Brett died, you lost your filter. I'm like, you're right. I did. She is right.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for coming on and speaking to us in your unfiltered way. It has been magnificent. Really, really good job. And we are looking forward to the support group that you mentioned. We will definitely be promoting that when you are ready. So keep us posted on that. And without any further ado, unless you've got anything else, we'll go ahead and start wrapping up, and then we'll go to the hangout session.
No, thank you so much for having me on. That's all I want to say.
Great. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much
everybody.
for
Thank you
being
for listening. So thank you.
This has been wonderful. We're getting lots of applause emojis. So thank you for that. And don't forget, everybody, come back and see us again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Next week will be our last RfRx episode of this year, but don't worry, we'll be coming back next year. We'll take 2 weeks off as we usually do over the holidays to rest and refresh and give everybody a break who works so hard to volunteer and make all of this stuff happen. So we will definitely be back, but we're here next week. We'll have a little bit of a chat with some of the other co-hosts that you know and love, and we'll be talking a little bit about holidays in a secular fashion, and we'll be having more of a kind of an informal little celebration. Feel free to come in any festive gear that you would like to celebrate whatever holidays you celebrate with us. We will be here next week for that. So besides that, if you would like to check out more RfRx in your life, which who doesn't need more RfRx in their lives, check us out on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts to watch some of the previous episodes. And don't forget, you can email us at rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org if you have questions, comments, death threats, anything like that. I very rarely get death threats. I'm not inviting death threats. I'm just saying, we do accept emails of all kinds. And don't forget our blog and our podcast, which I will drop the links to as well. And yeah, oh, excellent. Yes, thank you, Dr. Ray, for mentioning. Dr. Ray was joining us late this evening because he and some of our other volunteers have been very busy doing all sorts of other work. So check out that link that he just dropped as well. And I think he'll mention it here in just a second too. And don't forget to follow us on the social medias. If you use those, check us out. We're on Facebook. We have a Facebook support group page. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram, and we are even on TikTok. So if you use any of those platforms, give us a like, a listen, a subscribe, a share, whatever the type of thing is that you do on whichever platform you find us on. It really helps us out, and it helps other people find us and hopefully be able to benefit from some of the services and support that is available.
Details. All right. Well, thank you, Lindsey. I apologize. I didn't, as you know, I called up Lindsey. I forgot she was on this Monday. And I called her up to see if she would help me on another podcast. She said, well, aren't I doing this on Monday night for RfRx? I said, oh, shit. So I almost stole her away from you. So be careful. But anyway, thanks, Kara and John, who's on here as well, for making this possible and helping put this all together. Because behind the scenes, there's a lot of things that happen. And especially John. John has done a bunch of work with Lindsey to make this all happen, to have this new channel and to get her movies up and stuff like that. Lindsey, I've known Lindsey for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. I don't know how long it's been, Lindsey. But this, I have learned so much from her. She has educated me in a way I did not know I needed to be educated. So this is, I can't emphasize to you how beautiful a person she is and how much she cares about helping people understand and kind of changing the whole narrative around this subject, which, as you can see, she's doing an amazing job. The thing that strikes me about Lindsey and knowing her for so many years now is that she is a person who faces her fears. And a lot of us have trouble doing that, but she gets out there and faces her fears. I don't think that she lost her filter. I think she found her courage, and she's facing her fears through that courage. So, and the rest of us are benefiting from that. She told me about her movies and her book and all, and I thought, that's great. I've got lots of people I try to support and I work with. But then she started putting their films into these film festivals and winning awards. I'm thinking, what kind of a film? 2-minute film or 8-minute film, I don't remember how long it is, could be winning. That just makes no sense to me. And it took about a year before I was able to actually go to a theater here in Kansas City where she had entered into a festival and watched the damn film. And I'm crying like a baby at the end of it. I'm thinking, Okay, this is the most emotional 8 minutes I've experienced in a very long time. Now I understand why this movie is winning so many awards. So it is really worth watching. Go on our website, go on our community on the Suicide Loss Survivors channel and watch the movie. It will move you. It will educate you. It's amazing how much you can learn from 8 minutes of children, of someone talking to children. Because us adults, we don't talk about this very well. And Lindsey has made it, I think she's made it available to us adults as much or more than she's made it to children in some ways. So anyway, you guys have heard her. That's my endorsement of everything she's doing. Now to RfR stuff. You probably have seen that we put a billboard up this week. We are so excited about this. I looked at the stats just before I came on here. 749 people have looked at just one of our posts, and 514 people have shared the post about the billboard. Part of why we put the billboard up was to get attention, to get people asking the question, especially during the holiday period when people are feeling the loneliness and feeling the isolation because their families have disowned them and stuff. So go take a look on Facebook or wherever we put it up and hit a like, but more importantly, share it. Let people know this is up here. It's not just a billboard. It's a opportunity to raise awareness. And that's what we want to do. We'll probably, if it works, if it does what we hope it does, then we'll probably do some more of them. And if you want to support us, push the donate button and donate so we can put more billboards up. A part of our last spring's fundraiser was to do the billboard. And we raised an extra $5,000 during that fundraiser just to do billboards. So I guess that's all I've got here. Anyway, thanks so much for doing this, Lindsey. And we all look forward to working with you in the future within RfR, and we appreciate your willingness to work with us.